The empty throne room. The great throne room of the alien palace stood in silence. High ceilings curved above like the ribs of a giant beast, carved with golden lines that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air was heavy, as if it carried the weight of memories that refused to fade. At the center sat the queen, her tall figure wrapped in robes of black and silver, her crown glimmering with cold fire. Her people whispered of her strength, of how she had survived the galactic uprising that had torn her empire apart. They spoke of her sharp eyes, her iron commands, her unshaken rule, but none of them knew how hollow her heart had become. None of them saw the truth that haunted her nights. The queen had lost her daughter in the chaos of rebellion, and no victory, no throne. No army could heal that wound. She sat now alone, staring into the shadows that clung to the edges of the chamber. Her hands gripped the arms of her throne, her claws scratching against the cold stone. Every whisper of footsteps in the distance made her hope for a moment, only to crush that hope again. Her daughter had been her light. The one soft thing in her harsh life, and the uprising had stolen that light from her. The rebels had claimed they saw the child fall. Others said she was taken. Some even whispered she had been used as a bargaining tool. But no body had ever been found. Only silence and sorrow remained. The queen lowered her gaze, her lips tight. She would not let her court see her weakness. Not now, not ever. To them she was power, a wall that could not be broken, but inside, she was a mother who grieved every single day. Suddenly, the giant doors at the end of the hall groaned, the sound echoing like thunder. The guards tensed, their spears glowing with electric charge, their eyes sharp and ready. Few dared to enter the throne room uninvited, and fewer still walked away alive. The queen straightened, her eyes narrowing, the fire of suspicion burning within them. A figure stepped into the light of the chamber. It was not one of her people, not an ally, not a servant. It was something far more strange, far more dangerous. It was a human, the court gasped, voices rising in shock. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and even rarer within the halls of power to the queen. Humans were a mystery, fragile in body but impossible to bend in spirit. They were feared by many, hated by some but never ignored. The human walked with steady steps, not bowing, not trembling. His clothes were torn, dust covered his boots, but his eyes burned with purpose behind him. Something was hidden beneath a dark cloak, carried with careful arms. The queen leaned forward, her pulse quickening. Though she did not understand why, who dares enter my throne without summons? Her voice echoed through the hall like a blade. The guards moved closer, ready to strike at her command. But the human did not flinch, his gaze locked on the queen. "I come with a truth that belongs to you," he said. His voice firm yet calm. The queen's claws tapped against the throne, her suspicion deepening. What truth could a human hold, and why did he walk so boldly into her heart of power? The chamber fell into silence. Every guard, every servant, every council member waiting. The queen's eyes drifted to the cloaked figure in the human's arms. The shape was small, fragile, almost like a child. Her breath caught in her throat, though she forced herself to remain still. For a moment, something deep within her stirred, a whisper she had buried long ago. Could it be? No, it could not. She crushed the thought before it grew. Her daughter was gone. She had told herself that 1,000 times, and yet her heart beat faster, as if betraying the very armor she had built around it. The human stepped closer, ignoring the guards who snarled at his approach. The queen raised her hand, halting them, her eyes locked on the shrouded figure. Every second stretched like eternity. Every sound of footsteps rang like thunder in her ears. She felt the air grow heavy, felt her people's eyes on her, waiting to see her break or stand tall. The human stopped at the base of the steps that led to her throne. He lowered his arms slightly, the cloak shifting, revealing a hint of pale skin beneath. The queen's heart twisted, her breath sharp and unsteady. The silence of the throne room grew unbearable, and for the first time in many years, the queen felt fear. Not fear of war, not fear of death, but fear of hope, because hope, once awakened, could destroy her more completely than any blade. The throne room waited, frozen in the moment. The queen leaned forward, her voice soft, trembling with something she could not control. "Show me," she whispered. The human's arrival. The human stood at the foot of the throne, the silence of the chamber pressing down on him like a weight. The guards shifted uneasily, their weapons still humming with deadly energy. But none dared move without the queen's command. The queen's eyes were sharp, burning into the human with suspicion and cold fire. Her voice carried across the hall, steady and commanding. "Why are you here, human? Speak before I end your life where you stand." The human did not bow, did not lower his gaze. Instead, he drew a slow breath and tightened his hold on the cloaked figure in his arms. "I come with no weapon," he said, his words clear and calm. "Only with truth and with what belongs to you." The court erupted into murmurs, alien voices overlapping, some filled with anger, some with disbelief. The queen silenced them with a single glance, her hand raised, her clawed fingers curling with impatience. "Truth," she repeated, the word cold on her tongue. "Truth is a dangerous thing to carry into my hall, human. Explain yourself before my guards tear you apart." The human took one step forward, the sound of his boots echoing in the great chamber. The guards immediately crossed their weapons in warning, blue sparks flashing as their energy spears clashed together. He did not flinch, his eyes never leaving the queen. "The galaxy told you your daughter was gone forever," he said, his voice steady. But the galaxy lied. The queen froze, though she kept her face stern. Her claws scraped against the stone arms of her throne, leaving faint marks. The courtiers gasped, some hissing, others sneering, their distrust of the human louder than ever. "Blasphemy," one elder shouted. "Kill him, my queen." No human dares speak such poison. But the queen lifted her hand again, silencing the hall. Her gaze locked on the small, cloaked figure the human carried. Her voice was low, trembling just slightly beneath its sharp edge. "What do you carry, human?" The human slowly lowered the cloaked figure onto his feet, steadying the fragile form with care. The cloak slipped, just enough to reveal a glimpse of thin arms, pale skin, and fingers trembling like leaves in the wind. The figure wavered, weak, as if standing was a battle of its own. The queen's breath caught, though she did not move from her throne. Every memory of her child flashed through her mind, from the first time she held her, to the last scream of rebellion that had stolen her away. The court leaned forward, eyes wide, trying to see. "Show her face," the queen commanded, her voice cracking slightly, though she hid it under her authority. The human placed a steadying hand on the figure's shoulder, but the cloaked one raised a trembling hand, stopping him with slow, hesitant fingers. The figure reached up and pulled the hood back. Gasps filled the hall. The queen's heart nearly stopped, her vision blurring for a moment as she looked into the eyes she had thought she would never see again. The face was thinner, older, scarred by pain and time. But it was her daughter. Her knees almost gave way. Though she sat upon her throne, every wall she had built inside herself to bury her grief began to crumble. Her people stared in stunned silence, disbelief and awe mixing in their eyes. But the queen did not care for their judgment in that moment. Nothing existed but the fragile figure standing in front of her. The daughter's lips parted, her voice weak but clear. "Mother," she whispered. The sound pierced the queen's very soul. Her hand trembled on the throne, her claws cutting into the stone as she tried to hold herself together. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. The human stepped back, giving the queen and her daughter the space of the moment. But the courtiers erupted once again, their voices a storm of anger and suspicion. "This is a trick," one snarled. "The humans lie, they use illusions, this is not the princess." "It cannot be. Test her," another cried. "Prove her blood. Prove her name." The chamber became a chaos of voices echoing from every wall. The queen rose from her throne, her figure tall, her voice slicing through the noise like thunder. "Silence," she commanded, and the hall obeyed, trembling in her authority. Her eyes softened as she looked at the figure standing before her. The scars, the voice, the small birthmark near the eye, it was her. She knew it. She felt it in the deepest part of her soul. But still her heart demanded proof, her mind demanded truth. Her gaze turned once more to the human, sharp as a blade. "You will explain everything," she said, her voice steady but heavy with unspoken emotion. "You will tell me how my daughter lives when all the stars swore she was dead." The human bowed his head slightly, at last showing a sign of respect. "I will tell you, Queen," he said, "but what you hear will not be easy." The queen's hand clenched, her claws clicking against the throne. Her daughter reached out weakly, as if to touch her mother, but stopping halfway, afraid of breaking the fragile silence. The queen's heart thundered in her chest. For the first time in years she felt alive, not with anger, not with power, but with fear and hope. The chamber grew quiet once more, every being holding its breath. The queen stepped down from her throne, her shadow falling over her daughter and the human. And with eyes that glowed both with fury and longing, she whispered, "Then speak." Recognition in the shadows. The queen stood only a few steps away from the cloaked figure, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The throne room was so quiet that even the faint crackle of the guards' weapons seemed like thunder. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the small figure, the one who dared whisper the word that had nearly broken the queen's soul. Mother. It had been years since she had heard that voice, but even in its weakened tone, even with its frail sound, it carried the same melody that once filled her private chambers with laughter. The queen's claws trembled at her sides. Though she hid the shaking from her people, she had always told herself that hope was a poison, that believing her daughter lived was only a chain that would drag her deeper into sorrow. But now, hope stood before her, wrapped in scars and shadow. Yet alive, her throat tightened, and for a moment she could not breathe. "Step closer," she commanded, her voice heavy with both authority and fear. The figure obeyed, though the steps were unsteady, each one a struggle against weakness that clung to her frame. The human moved to support her, but the girl raised a hand, pushing him back gently. She wanted to face her mother on her own feet, no matter how frail. The queen's eyes widened as the dim light touched her daughter's face fully for the first time. The sharp cheekbones, the small scar above the brow, the faint birthmark near the corner of her left eye. These were things no trickster, no illusion, no human liar could know to replicate. Her daughter had them, and now this girl had them too. Gasps spread through the court, some voices rising in awe, others hissing in suspicion. "It is her," someone whispered. "By the stars. It is the lost princess." "No," another growled. "It cannot be. The rebels destroyed her. This must be some plot." The queen ignored them, her focus trapped on the trembling figure who now stood just a step away. The girl's lips parted again, and though her voice shook, the word spilled once more. "Mother." That single word struck the queen harder than any blade. Her knees weakened, but her pride forced her to stand tall, her eyes gleaming with the tears she refused to release. Slowly, almost against her own will, the queen lifted a hand. Her fingers hovered in the air, uncertain, trembling, afraid that if she touched this figure, the illusion would shatter. But the girl did not pull back. Instead, she leaned forward, her cheek brushing lightly against the queen's clawed hand. The contact broke the queen's armor, and a tear slipped down her cheek, glistening in the golden light of the throne room. "She lives," the queen whispered, her voice cracking. "My daughter lives." The court erupted once more, the storm of voices clashing. Some shouted for celebration, others cried out for blood. "This is dangerous," one elder warned. "The rebels will use this against us. The human has tricked her." "This cannot be trusted," another shouted. "No human saves an heir. No human acts without purpose. This is a scheme, a weapon hidden in flesh." The queen silenced them with a roar, her voice so powerful that even the guards flinched. "I see with my own eyes, I hear with my own heart. No counsel will tell me the truth of my blood," she thundered. Her people shrank back, their doubts swallowed by her authority. Though their eyes still flickered with fear and suspicion, the human stepped forward once more, his expression calm. "She is alive because I found her," he said. "Because I carried her from the ruins when no one else dared." The queen's eyes snapped to him, her anger rising again. The sight of her daughter stirred gratitude, but the thought that a human had been her savior made her pride burn with fire. "You dare claim you saved her when my armies failed? When my empire fell silent in her search?" she spat. The human did not back down. "I dare speak only truth. Your daughter was betrayed not by humans, but by her own." The queen's eyes narrowed. Her claws curling into fists, the daughter flinched, her body trembling as if the words pulled memories she had tried to bury. The queen saw it, saw the shadow of pain cross her child's face, and in that instant she knew the human spoke something terrible, something she was not yet ready to hear. Her voice softened, though anger still flickered beneath it. "You will explain," she said coldly, "but not here. Not before the ears of those who twist truth into poison." She turned her gaze back to her daughter, her eyes softening for the first time in years. "You are mine," she whispered. "Nothing will take you from me again." The girl's eyes filled with tears, her fragile hand reaching out, but before their fingers could fully touch, the human's voice cut through the silence. "There is more you must know," he said, his tone grave, "and it will decide the fate of more than just your throne." The queen froze, her daughter shivering beside her, the court holding its breath once more. The truth was close, and though it could bring healing, it could also bring ruin, and in that moment, under the weight of shadows and suspicion, the queen understood. Her world had only begun to tremble. The story of survival, the queen stood close to her daughter, her claws shaking as she held herself still. Her people waited, their eyes burning with suspicion, their whispers echoing in the high chamber. But her gaze was fixed only on the human, the stranger who had walked into her hall with what she had believed lost forever. Her voice, sharp and steady, cut through the silence. "Speak, human. Tell me how she lives when the stars told me she was gone." The human nodded slowly, his face calm, though there was weight in his eyes, a weight carried for many years. "She did not die in the uprising," he began, his voice firm but quiet, echoing across the chamber. "When the rebels stormed your palace, when fire burned across the skies, she was betrayed by those who swore to protect her." The queen stiffened, her breath sharp. Her daughter lowered her eyes, shame flickering across her scarred face. Gasps ran through the council, the courtiers shifting uneasily, their distrust of the human clashing with the undeniable pain in the girl's expression. "She was struck down," the human continued, "left for dead among the ruins, abandoned when her bloodline was no longer useful to them." The queen's claws dug into the stone, her rage rising. Her people had sworn loyalty, her generals had promised safety, yet here stood proof that those promises had been broken. The human's eyes softened as he looked at the girl. "I found her among the ashes," he said, barely breathing, broken, but alive. "I carried her far from the battlefield, beyond the reach of the Empire and the rebels. I hid her among the forgotten colonies, where no one cared for crowns or thrones. I gave her shelter. I gave her food. I gave her the chance to heal." The queen's chest tightened, her pride warring with gratitude. Her daughter had lived because of him, not because of her empire, not because of her armies, but because of a single human who had chosen compassion over advantage. The girl raised her head, her voice fragile but clear. "It is true, mother," she whispered. "He saved me when no one else would, when even our own people cast me aside. He was the one who kept me alive." Her eyes filled with tears, her hand clutching at the cloak around her shoulders. "He taught me to walk again, to speak again. He gave me hope when I had none." The queen's claws trembled against her throne, her pride shattered by the truth. Her empire had failed, her loyalists had betrayed, and yet a human, a creature her people mistrusted, had carried her daughter through the shadows of death. Her voice was low, filled with storm and sorrow. "Why, human? Why would you risk so much for a child not your own? Why would you carry her burden when it was not yours?" The human met her gaze without fear. "Because I could not watch innocence be destroyed by the hatred of others," he said. "Because I knew what it was to lose, and I would not let her suffer the same fate." His words were simple, but they struck deep, shaking even the hardest warriors who listened. The courtiers shouted in protest, their voices rising in a storm. "No human speaks truth," one barked. "He twists words to win your trust." "Exile him," another cried. "Send him to the void before his lies poison the throne." The queen silenced them with a sharp gesture. Her eyes still locked on the human, her daughter reached out, her fragile fingers brushing against her mother's arm. "Please," she whispered, "listen to him. He is no liar. Every scar on my body is proof of what he did for me." She pulled back her cloak, revealing the marks of survival etched across her skin, thin lines, old burns, the signs of battles fought in silence. The queen's heart broke at the sight, her tears finally falling, no longer hidden. The hall fell quiet, the storm of voices dying under the weight of truth. The human lowered his head, his voice softer now. "I kept her hidden because I feared what would happen if the Empire or the rebels found her. I raised her not as a princess, but as a child who deserved life." He stepped back slightly, his gaze steady. "And now I return her to you, because her place is here, because she deserves the choice to stand where she belongs." The queen's knees weakened, her body trembling with emotions she could no longer bury. She looked at her daughter, alive, fragile, scarred, but hers. Then she looked at the human, the one who had carried her hope through years of darkness. Her voice shook, raw and broken. "You saved her when I could not. You did what my empire failed to do." For the first time in her reign, the queen fell to her knees before her daughter. The court gasped. None had ever seen their ruler bow. But she did not bow to power, she bowed to love, to blood, to the miracle she thought lost forever. Her daughter rushed forward, weak but determined, and fell into her mother's arms. The two held each other, tears streaming down their faces, the years of pain breaking apart in that single embrace. The human stepped back into the shadows. Watching silently, he had carried his burden for years, and now he laid it at the feet of the one who had lost most. But he knew this was not the end, for truth once spoken could not be buried again, and the galaxy would tremble when the story of survival spread. The court divided. The queen held her daughter close, her tears soaking the girl's hair, her body trembling with relief and fury all at once. Her heart had been broken for years, and now it beat again. But with that joy came fire. A fire that demanded answers, a fire that demanded justice. The chamber was silent for only a breath. Then the storm erupted. Voices clashed in a roar, courtiers shouting over each other, council members pointing fingers, guards tightening their grip on weapons. Some shouted with awe, "The princess lives. The bloodline stands unbroken, the empire has hope again." Others spat venom. "This is a trick, the human has woven lies. He brings a shadow into the queen's heart." One elder slammed his staff to the ground, his voice sharp, "Do not be blinded by tears. My queen, humans twist truth, they use weakness as weapons. This is their way." The queen rose, her daughter still weak against her arm. Her eyes blazed with a fury no one in the chamber had seen before. "Silence," she commanded, her voice like thunder shaking the very walls. For a moment the court obeyed, the echoes of her wrath still lingering in the air, but whispers soon returned. Quieter, sharper, like knives in the dark. The human stood still, his shoulders straight, his gaze calm. Though every eye in the chamber stabbed him with suspicion, he did not flinch, did not argue, he simply waited, as if he knew the storm would come. The queen's claws dug into her daughter's shoulder gently, her voice lowered but steady. "You will tell them, child. Tell them who you are." The girl raised her head, her voice trembling but clear enough to carry. "I am your daughter," she said. "I am the blood you thought lost. I am the one who lived when all said I was gone." She stepped forward weakly, her scarred face catching the light. "I remember the halls of this palace. I remember your embrace before the fire. I remember the lullabies you sang when the stars were cruel." Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, "I am yours, mother, always." Gasps filled the chamber, some bowing their heads in shame, others still glaring in disbelief. "It could be memory stolen," one muttered. "It could be tricks fed into her mind," another sneered. "Even if she is who she claims, the human has poisoned her with his lies. He is no savior. He is a threat." The queen's eyes snapped toward them, her voice sharp. "Would you deny the truth of my own blood? Would you stand against your queen's heart?" But her words only split the chamber deeper, the council now tearing itself in half. One side cried for loyalty to the bloodline, to the returned heir. The other side cried for caution, for exile, for the human's death. The human stepped forward at last, his voice steady but strong. "I saved her not to claim a throne, not to poison her blood. I saved her because no child deserves to be left to die in the ashes of betrayal." He pulled something from within his cloak, a small pendant worn and cracked. This was hers. "The day I found her," he said. She clutched it even as her breath faltered. The queen's eyes widened, her claws reaching forward to take the pendant. She recognized it instantly. The pendant she had given her daughter as a child, a piece of her crown forged into a gift, a symbol of her bond. Her breath caught, her tears falling anew. No illusion could recreate this. No trickster could forge the memory carried within that simple jewel. The court erupted again, but now the voices were not only suspicion, they were fear. "What does this mean for the empire?" one shouted. "The rebels who betrayed us will rise again if they learn she lives. Humans will claim glory in our halls," another spat. "Our enemies will see weakness. They will see the queen bending to a stranger." The noise grew wild. The council no longer a place of order, but a battlefield of words. The queen raised her hand, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Enough," she thundered. "My daughter lives, and no voice in this chamber will deny it. But the truth has brought division, and division will bring blood." Her eyes turned to the human, sharp as blades. "And you, human, have carried this storm into my hall. You will answer for it." The human bowed his head slightly, though his eyes did not waver. "I will answer," he said, "but not with excuses, only with truth. The same truth I gave her when she asked me why I saved her." His words hung heavy in the chamber, silence falling for the first time since the storm began. The queen studied him, her heart torn between fury, gratitude, and fear of the fire his presence had lit. Her daughter stepped between them, weak but determined, her arms outstretched. "Do not harm him," she begged. "He is no enemy. He is the reason I stand here today. Without him, I would have been dust among ruins. Without him, I would never have spoken your name again." The queen looked at her child, then at the human, then at her divided court. She saw the path ahead, a path of war, of suspicion, of choices that would shake the empire. Her claws tightened, her voice low, trembling with emotion. "Then let the stars bear witness, the truth is alive, and the court will decide its fate." The chamber fell into silence once more. But this silence was sharp, dangerous, the silence of a blade hovering before the strike. And in that silence the queen knew the galaxy had shifted, and nothing would be the same again. The queen's breaking point. The queen stood at the center of the storm, her council divided, her throne behind her, her daughter before her, and the human unshaken under the weight of 100 hostile eyes. She had ruled for years with iron claws, never once faltering, never once letting her enemies or her people see the weakness that lived inside her. But now that weakness was no longer hidden, it stood before them in flesh and bone, her daughter, alive yet scarred, saved not by her empire but by a human. Her chest rose and fell as she tried to keep her composure. Her people watched with suspicion, some waiting for her to condemn the human, others praying she would accept her child without question. The voices of the court still murmured in the shadows, whispers of fear and doubt, but the queen could hear none of it. All she heard was the beating of her heart, louder than war drums, shaking her very soul. Her daughter's fragile hand brushed her arm again, trembling, warm, real. The queen's eyes closed, her body shuddering with emotion. She had dreamed of this moment countless times, dreamed of her child walking back through the palace gates, dreamed of hearing her voice, dreamed of holding her again. But dreams were cruel and reality was harsher. And now here she stood, torn between a mother's heart and a ruler's pride. The human's voice broke the silence, calm and steady. "You ask why I did it," he said. "Why I carried her through fire and shadow. Why I risked my life for a child not my own." He looked around the hall, his gaze sweeping across the sea of doubtful eyes, then returned to the queen. "Because no one deserves to lose a child. No crown, no throne. No empire changes that truth." The queen's lips trembled, her claws curling against her palms until they drew blood. His words pierced her armor, words simple yet heavier than any blade. She wanted to deny him, to reject the thought that a human could understand the pain that had ruled her heart for so long. But she saw her daughter's eyes full of trust for him, full of gratitude, and she knew the truth could not be denied. The court erupted again, voices of anger, voices of warning, voices demanding his blood. "Kill him," some shouted. "He dares insult the empire, he dares stand equal before the queen." "Banish him," others cried. "Cast him into the void," before his words spread like fire through the stars. But some voices, quieter, trembling, spoke another truth. He saved her. He did what none of us could. Can we deny what we see before our own eyes? The queen raised her hands, her claws gleaming in the dim light, her voice shaking yet thunderous. "Enough," she roared, and the chamber shook. Silence followed, heavy and waiting. Her eyes turned to her daughter, soft for the first time in years. "My child," she whispered, the words breaking apart on her tongue. "Forgive me for not being there, for letting them take you, for believing you were gone." Her voice cracked, and she fell to her knees, her tears falling openly before all. The court gasped, their queen, the unbreakable ruler, kneeling in her own hall, her tears flowing like rivers of grief. Her daughter collapsed into her arms, their embrace desperate and unyielding, years of sorrow melting into that single moment. The queen held her tightly, her voice trembling as she pressed her head against her daughter's. "No power matters more than this," she whispered. "No throne, no crown. No empire can replace what I lost." Her daughter wept, whispering back, "I never stopped calling for you. Even when no one answered, I never stopped waiting for you." "Mother," the human stood in silence, watching the scene unfold for the first time. The court saw not a queen of iron, but a mother of flesh and heart. And though many were unsettled, though many whispered of weakness, there were some whose eyes softened, whose walls cracked at the sight. The queen rose slowly, still holding her daughter, but her gaze turned sharp once more. She looked at her council, Her warriors, her servants, her voice steadier now. You call this weakness, she said, her tone heavy with command. But you are blind, for it is strength. Strength born not of power, but of love. And love has kept my daughter alive when all of you abandoned her. Her eyes cut to the human, blazing with a mix of fury and respect. You carried her when my armies failed. You protected her when my generals betrayed. You gave her life when I thought it was lost. She stepped closer, her daughter's hand in hers, her voice sharp. But your truth shakes the empire. Human, your truth will divide the stars, and for that, I cannot ignore you. The chamber stood frozen, the court too stunned to move. The queen's tears still glistened on her cheeks, but her voice carried like fire. For years they said she was gone. For years I ruled with sorrow in my heart, but today the galaxy learns this: my daughter lives, and no one will take her from me again. The courtiers lowered their heads, some in loyalty, some in fear, but none dared challenge her again. The queen pulled her daughter close, her voice softer, broken yet full of fire. I have lost once, I will not lose again. And for the first time, the unbreakable queen broke before her people. But in her breaking, she became something stronger than ever before. The answer that shakes the galaxy. The throne room still echoed with silence, the queen holding her daughter, the council trembling in fear of what had just unfolded. For the first time in living memory, their queen had broken, their queen had wept, their queen had knelt before another being. It was not weakness, it was not surrender, it was something far more dangerous. It was truth, raw and undeniable. The human stood in the center of it all, calm and steady, his presence a wound and a miracle at once. The queen lifted her head, her eyes red from tears, her voice low but sharp. You saved her when I could not. You carried her when I believed her lost. But now I ask the question all demand to know: why human? Why risk everything for her? Every ear in the chamber strained for the answer. Some expected a scheme, a demand, a price to be paid. Others expected betrayal, that the human would use this moment to shatter their empire. But the human did not speak with arrogance, nor with greed. His words were simple, his tone unshaken. Because no one deserves to lose a child, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. Not a queen, not a beggar, not anyone beneath the stars. The words hung heavy in the air, more powerful than any weapon, more devastating than any army. The court froze. Even the guards lowered their spears. Their eyes wide, it was not the answer they expected. But it was the answer none could fight. The queen's claws trembled, her breath caught in her throat. She had ruled with laws and blades. She had commanded fleets and crushed rebellions, but this human, fragile in body, had spoken words that stripped her of every defense. Words that struck deeper than all her enemies ever had. She looked at him, her eyes full of both fury and awe. You speak of loss as if you know it, she whispered. The human nodded once, his gaze steady. I do, he said. I lost my family to war. I buried them under burning skies. I carried the weight of their absence every day since. His voice broke slightly, though he held it firm. When I found her broken and alone, I swore no one else would suffer as I did. I swore I would carry her no matter the cost, because in saving her, I found a piece of myself again. The queen's lips parted, her chest heavy with emotion she could not control. Her daughter clutched her hand, whispering softly, Mother, believe him. The queen looked at the fragile girl in her arms, her scars, her trembling form, and she knew the truth was already written across her daughter's survival. The council stirred, voices rising in conflict once more. This cannot stand, one cried. The human is a threat. His words weaken us. No, another countered. His words are truth, and truth is strength. The chamber threatened to erupt again. But the queen rose tall, her daughter beside her, her voice cutting through like fire. Enough, she commanded. You call him a threat, but he has done what none of you could. You call him a liar, but every scar upon my daughter proves his truth. She stepped down from the throne, her figure towering, her daughter leaning against her side. I will not cast aside the one who gave me back my child. I will not kill the one who carried hope where I had none. Her claws pointed toward the human, her voice both sharp and solemn. You are no longer an intruder in my hall. You are no longer a stranger to my people. From this day you are protector of the crown, guardian of the bloodline you saved. Gasps filled the chamber. Outrage clashed with awe. A human, named protector of an alien throne. It was unthinkable, impossible. Yet it had just been spoken by the queen herself. The council trembled. The galaxy itself seemed to shiver under the weight of the words. The human bowed his head slightly, though his eyes still burned with quiet fire. "I did not come for honor," he said. "I did not come for a title." The Queen's voice softened. "And yet you have both, whether you wish it or not." Her daughter leaned against her, smiling weakly through her tears. "He deserves it, Mother. He gave me life when all else was lost." The Queen's heart swelled, her tears falling once more. But this time they were not only of grief, they were of something new, something fragile and bright. Hope, the throne room, filled with enemies and doubters, fell into silence once more. But it was not the silence of suspicion now. It was the silence of history, the silence that comes when the stars themselves pause to listen. The Queen stood tall, her daughter safe at her side, the human before her, and she declared with fire in her voice, "Let the galaxy know this day, the day a queen was given back her child, not by her armies, not by her empire, but by the hands of a human. Let them know that truth, and let them tremble." And as her words echoed across the chamber, across the palace, across the stars themselves, the galaxy did tremble, not with war, not with fear, but with the weight of something far more dangerous than either, with the weight of humanity.